Close your eyes and immerse yourself in the soundscape. There are no visuals you need to see. Let my whispered tale lull you into a deep, restful sleep as we journey into the haunted heart of the woods. The city lights have always been my sanctuary, a glowing refuge from the shadows of my past. I'm Clara, a 28-year-old journalist living in the heart of New York City. Most people find solace in the quiet of nature, but for me, it's the hum of traffic and the distant chatter of a bustling city that lull me to sleep. Yet, beneath the seemingly confident exterior, my heart holds on to scars, deep wounds of betrayal. I've loved deeply, been hurt even deeper, and in my quest to heal, I ventured into a place where the shadows of my past paled in comparison to the horrors I would come to face. The cold sting of betrayal is something you never really prepare for, even if deep down, you knew it was coming. It was a typical Sunday morning. The kind where the world outside my window was draped in a muted gray, hinting at rain. I was looking for my book in Ethan's drawer when I stumbled upon a folded piece of paper. The weight of the words hit me like a ton of bricks. It's not you, it's me. That line, the most cliched breakup sentence ever, stared back at me. It was like a slap in the face. My heart felt as if it had been encased in ice. There was no confrontation, no face-to-face, just this letter. A coward's exit. The room, which was filled with our shared memories, suddenly felt alien. Every photo, every trinket, every laugh we shared, it all felt like a lie. My breath caught in my throat, tears blurring my vision. How could he? After everything? In a whirlwind of emotions, I started to pack my bags. I just needed to escape, to get away from the memories, the pain. As I packed, my hand brushed against an old, dusty photograph at the bottom of Ethan's drawer. It depicted a hut, secluded amidst towering trees with misty mountains in the backdrop. But it was the hurried scribble on the back that caught my attention, "Never go here." It seemed out of place. Ethan was never the superstitious type. Why such a warning for a seemingly serene place? Maybe it was the turmoil in my heart or the numbing shock of the letter, but an idea formed. An escape to a place Ethan warned against? Perfect. There was something about that photograph, an eerie allure. It felt like an invitation, a challenge, beckoning me towards the very mystery it portrayed. I needed solitude, a place to mend, to think, and what better place than somewhere Ethan clearly wanted to forget. With a mix of rebellion, hurt, and determination, I decided. I was heading to that secluded hut in the mountains. The place Ethan warned against. The place that, unbeknownst to me, would turn my world upside down. After hours of driving and following the barely legible map I had found with the photograph, the dense foliage of the wood started to part, giving way to a clearing. As my car bumped along the overgrown path, the first sight of the hut sent shivers down my spine. The hut was old, its wood weathered and gray, almost blending into the thick trees that surrounded it. But it wasn't just the appearance of the hut that unsettled me, it was the feeling, an undeniable sense of being observed. The windows of the hut, dark and vacant, seemed like eyes, watching my every move. The world around was hushed, the usual chirping of birds or rustling of leaves eerily absent. Only a cold breeze, which felt more like a sigh from the woods, rustled my hair, its whispers hinting at secrets long kept. I hesitated for a moment, taking in the scenery, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Maybe this was a mistake. But then, the thoughts of Ethan's betrayal surged back, fueling my determination. I wasn't going to be driven away by an old decrepit hut or the creepy vibes of a forest. I grabbed my bags and made my way to the entrance. The interior of the hut was relatively preserved, considering how old it looked from the outside. Dust motes danced in the dim light, and the air smelled of old wood and mildew. As I unpacked and tried to settle in, my eyes caught sight of an old, leather-bound diary on a rustic wooden table by the window. Drawn to it, I picked it up. The diary was old, its pages yellowed with age. Flipping it open, the first few entries were mundane, details of day-to-day life. But as I skimmed further, the tone of the writing shifted, becoming more frantic and disturbed. She watches from the trees. Her eyes, they follow me. I hear her whispers at night, like a lullaby but twisted and wrong. Another entry read, "Why won't she leave me?" The shadows, they move. They dance to her song. The woods are alive with her presence. The final entry was the most chilling. "She's here. I can't escape. Those aren't birds singing. It's her, calling to me, pulling me deeper into the woods." The writing became more erratic, ending with a smudged ink stain, as if the writer was abruptly interrupted. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. What had I walked into? The tales of her, the mysterious entity the diary spoke of, sent my mind racing. Was it just the ramblings of a disturbed mind, or was there truth to the tales? Night was approaching, and with it, the haunting words of the diary echoed in my mind. The woods outside, once just a backdrop, now seemed alive, waiting. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the dense canopy of the woods, I decided to venture out. Perhaps a hike would clear my mind, make me feel less isolated in this strange place. The forest was a labyrinth, every tree and path looking eerily similar to the last. The dense trees seemed to reach out, their branches grazing my arms like bony fingers, making me feel trapped in their grasp. As I walked, I could have sworn I felt eyes on me, not from animals, but something more sinister. Several times, I paused, convinced I heard the faintest sound of laughter, like that of a child. It was faint, teasing, and always seemed to come from just beyond where my eyes could see. Despite my unease, I pressed on, the need for distraction outweighing my fears. But as the hours wore on, the once familiar landmarks of my hike started to seem foreign. The trail I was so sure I was on had vanished, replaced by an endless sea of trees. Panic began to set in. How had I become so disoriented? As the day began to fade, a premature darkness cloaked the forest. This wasn't the gentle descent of night I was used to, this was something more menacing. It was as if the woods were swallowing the light, casting shadows that moved and morphed into grotesque shapes. I started to hear them, whispered voices, so faint yet so clear, calling out my name. Clara. Clara. They weren't friendly, they were chilling, as if they were trying to lure me deeper into the darkness. I tried to move towards what I thought was the direction of the hut, but every step felt heavier, every turn leading me further astray. And then, she appeared. The old woman. Not as a beacon of hope but as a silhouette against the night, her presence radiating a cold malevolence. Her eyes, though clouded with age, bore into mine with a warning. "Turn back," she rasped, her voice gravelly and deep. "She's watching. She doesn't like trespassers." But there was nowhere to turn back to. Lost and enveloped in a darkness that felt alive, I realized that this forest held secrets, and she was at the heart of them all. The woods seemed to close in around me, each tree like a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. With the old woman's warning still ringing in my ears, I knew I had to find a way back to the hut. But as I pushed deeper into the forest, hoping to find a familiar landmark, the landscape began to reveal eerie remnants of its past. There was a clearing where the remnants of what looked like past campers lay scattered around. A decaying tent, its fabric torn and frayed, flapped weakly in the wind. Next to it, a rusted camping stove, and nearby, an old, tattered backpack spilled its contents, tarnished utensils, a mildewed sleeping bag, and scattered, faded photographs of smiling faces, oblivious to the fate that awaited them. But what sent a jolt of fear through me was a child's doll. Its porcelain face was smeared with grime and its glassy eyes were brutally scratched out. The sight of it, so out of place in the wilderness, whispered tales of innocence lost and evil that lurked in the shadows. The air grew colder as the sky was painted with twilight hues. Desperate to find my way back, I trudged onward, when suddenly, she appeared again, the old woman. Standing behind a tree, her hollow eyes stared at me, filled with a mix of pity and dread. "Why didn't you listen?" she murmured, her voice shaking. "She is awake. And she knows you're here." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. "Who is she?" I demanded. But the old woman only shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "Remember the ones before you," she whispered, pointing to the remnants in the clearing. "She never lets go." And just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished into the mist, leaving me alone with her chilling words. As darkness enveloped the woods, a silence, thick and oppressive, settled around me. But this silence was short-lived. Whispered voices began to rise, echoing through the trees. They were no longer just whispers. They were cries, shouts, laughter, a cacophony of sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Among those voices, one stood out. "Ethan's. Clara, leave. Get out while you still can." My heart raced as shadows danced around me. Dark apparitions, half-seen figures, moved just out of sight, their forms barely discernible. I felt eyes on me, not just watching, but piercing through me. Every rustle, every footstep, every breath seemed magnified, as if the forest itself was alive and hungry. I tried to move, to run, but fear paralyzed me. The voices grew louder, more insistent, more menacing. My own breath caught in my throat, and I felt an overwhelming sense of despair. In the heart of the woods, surrounded by the echoes of its haunted past, I felt the weight of her presence. The entity that the diary, the old woman, and now even Ethan's voice warned of. And as the night wore on, I began to realize the horrifying truth. I wasn't just lost in the woods. I was trapped in her domain. Dawn felt ages away. The oppressive darkness of the forest seemed to play tricks on my mind. The trees, the paths, everything appeared to shift and morph with every step I took. There was a gnawing sense of being pursued. Several times, I would catch a fleeting glimpse of a shadowy figure, always just out of reach, always just around the next turn. Whispers continued to close in around me, and every so often, I'd feel a cold, clammy touch brush against my back, just missing its grasp. The paths ahead would twist and contort, at times even vanishing behind me. Trees that seemed familiar would suddenly appear alien. Streams I hadn't crossed before blocked my way. It was a disorienting, nightmarish maze, and panic began to take hold. Each breath became laborious. Every sound, be it a snapping twig or rustling leaves, sent my heart racing. But, amid this palpable fear, a glimmer of hope emerged. A faint, flickering light in the distance. Drawn to it like a moth to a flame, I mustered the strength to move forward. Emerging from the dense trees, I found myself facing a small, decrepit hut. The source of the light, a lone candle on a windowsill, its flame dancing wildly. Hesitating for just a moment, I approached, pushing open the creaky door. The interior was modest, filled with aged furniture and walls lined with faded photographs and strange symbols. But what caught my attention was a central table. On it was a bottle, containing a shimmering elixir, and beside it, an old diary. I opened the diary to find entries from the old woman. It spoke of a tragic tale of love and betrayal. A young woman named Alara, who once lived in these woods, deeply in love with a man from the town. But, overcome by greed and lust for another, he betrayed her, leading to her untimely death. Heartbroken and vengeful, her spirit was bound to the woods, her sorrow and rage manifesting as the curse, trapping and tormenting all who dared enter her domain. The elixir, as the diary described, was not of truth but of memory. It was a way to witness Alara's past, to understand her pain, and perhaps find a way to appease her. With trembling hands, I uncorked the bottle, the scent of forgotten memories wafting through the air. Taking a deep breath, I took a sip, hoping to find answers within Alara's tormented memories. Every ounce of my being screamed at me to leave the hut, to escape the forest that had become a prison of fear. But as the memories of Alara flooded my mind, a newfound determination ignited within me. Bursting out of the hut, the weight of Alara's memories pushed me forward. But it was clear the forest wasn't going to let me go without a fight. The once passive whispers became deafening screams, urging the very forest to block my path. Shadowy figures darted between trees, their cries echoing the heartbreak of a lost soul. Branches reached out, trying to snag my clothes, to pull me into the darkness. The ground beneath felt unstable, shifting and tilting, trying to throw me off balance. But Alara's memories, her pain and love, acted as a beacon, guiding me through the treacherous terrain. As I ran, Ethan's voice came back to me, not as a warning this time, but as encouragement. Clara, remember. Understand her pain. It's the only way. And then, in the heart of the woods, where the darkness was thickest, I found her. Alara's spirit, a swirling mass of anger and sorrow. Her eyes, once full of love, now burned with betrayal and vengeance. But rather than running, I stepped forward, hands raised, not in defense, but in understanding. Alara, I whispered, I know your pain. I've felt heartbreak, betrayal. I understand. The spirit paused, its form quivering. It seemed to scan my memories, seeing the parallels in our stories. I can't change your past, Alara, I continued, my voice shaking but firm. But I can offer you solace. Your pain has become this forest's curse. Let me help you find peace. Tears formed in the spirit's eyes, reflecting centuries of anguish. The wood seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Slowly, the vengeful aura around Alara dissipated. She approached, her form becoming more human-like, more vulnerable. With a nod, she gestured at the forest around us. One by one, the shadowy figures faded, their cries turning into sighs of relief. The forest, once a prison of fear, seemed to breathe freely, its curse lifted. Facing Alara, our eyes locked, two souls bound by shared pain and newfound understanding. With a smile, she whispered, "Thank you," before dissipating into the wind, leaving me alone in the now serene woods, a symbol of both the destructive power of pain and the healing power of understanding. After the serene resolution in the woods, I naively believed that returning to the bustling city would bring an end to my ordeal. But, as the saying goes, you can leave the forest, but the forest never really leaves you. My first night back in my apartment, the sounds of the city, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional sirens, the subtle night life, were overshadowed by an eerie silence. That same silence that I had become all too familiar with in the forest. In the corner of my eyes, I would often catch fleeting movements, shadows darting just beyond my sight. At night, the hushed whispers would return, not as screams but as soft, haunting murmurs, a ghostly lullaby that kept me on edge. One evening, I finally mustered the courage to meet Ethan. We met at a quiet cafe, away from the prying eyes of the world. He looked older, his eyes weighed down by guilt and memories. As we talked, Ethan revealed his painful secret. A lover he lost in those very woods years ago. He knew of the curse, knew of the vengeful spirit that was Alara. And in a twisted way, by betraying me, he believed he was keeping me away from the forest's snare. My love, he whispered with tears in his eyes, I tried to push you away, to keep you safe. I never wanted you to suffer Alara's wrath. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, it became abundantly clear that while I may have appeased Alara in the woods, a part of her, or perhaps a part of the forest itself, had latched onto me. My apartment, once a haven, now felt oppressive. The walls seemed to close in, the very air thick with a chilling presence. Each night, as I'd lay in bed, the whispers would grow louder, reminding me of the forest, of Alara, of the pain and the betrayal. One fateful evening, as I sat in my living room, the city lights casting a faint glow, I heard it. A soft, melodic whisper, so close it was as if it was right beside me, you understood my pain, Clara. Now you'll never be alone. A shiver ran down my spine. The reality hit me, the haunting woods, the vengeful spirit, the tormenting shadows, they were now a part of me. And as the darkness of the night enveloped my apartment, I realized that my encounter with the forest was far from over. The horror had followed me home, and it was here to stay.